Alright, what's happening? Thanks for joining me. I'm Chris, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to check out my cellar and sort of talk about cellaring for a minute, just because there's been some questions about it. What is it? Why do you do it? Stuff like that. So, just probably to start off, probably the most common thing is, isn't beer meant to be drank fresh? And for the most part, 98, 99% of it, probably close to 100% of it should be drank fresh. At least to be able to know what it tastes like, just having it as what the brewer intended it to taste like, trying it right when it comes out, is probably the ideal thing to do with it. That being said, some of them can be stored for several years. Some of them you can do 20 years or something like that. But in general, aging a beer is going to change how it tastes, both in the amount of alcohol you can taste and maybe the general flavors of the beer. But just to start with, a good beer, something that would be applicable for cellaring, you generally want maybe at like the 8% ABV or higher, and definitely something that's going to be more malt forward than hop forward. Things like IPAs or pale ales, those are meant to be drank as fresh as possible. Some people argue, say it's like, oh, well, I have this double IPA and I've been trying to turn it into some sort of a barley wine. It could happen, but in general, those are just meant to be drank fresh. And I haven't really had a double IPA where I was like, wow, that really benefited from cellaring it. Not that I've ever really tried any of that, but ones that I've had that have been a little bit further out, just like, this fell off and it doesn't really taste that great. But anyway, generally things that I like to cellar, I have some barley wine, bunch of barley wines up through these sections here. Some imperial stouts, the Brooklyn Black Chocolate Stouts, or some Belgians, Three Philosophers, some old ales. That generally seems to be, that's the majority of the makeup in general. There's a couple, there's like a sour up there, some Belgian triples, wheat wines, just generally stuff like that. That's primarily what you'll see people cellaring. Also, getting into that, like lambics and goose benefit from extended cellaring. I don't know much about those, so I'm not going to speak to those, but in general, people really enjoy putting those down. So maybe just sort of talking about generally the ideal condition here. You want it to be 50, 55 degrees. That's ideal, as they call it on the internet. Right now, it's about 50 degrees. In the summer down here, it gets into the 60s, which apparently is, it's not ideal, but it gets the job done. Most of the time, even though it's pitch black down here, I keep this this old comforter just sort of hung down over it to block all light, because another key component to properly being able to cellar something and get it, tasting the way it should be after however many years, is to be able to keep it completely out of light and cool. So those are generally the two key components of cellaring. That and having the willpower to just sort of start a cellar, is all you're doing is putting beer away. It's a nice collection. You just look back and you're like, shit, that looks good. And then you get to the point where you're like, oh, I actually intended to drink stuff out of this. Because, after several years, you're like, I've only had this one bottle, and do I want to take it out? So it's one of those willpower, but yes, beer was meant to be drank, and instead of sitting around acting like a Nancy, debating whether you're going to take this bottle out, probably just best to do it. There also is some talk about whether you can store beers on their side versus standing upright, such as I've done. Pretty much from my understanding and everything I've heard from other people, is standing them upright is the way to go. There's less surface area of the beer to be exposed to. It's that little bit of leftover air or oxygen in the beer that can oxidize it apparently faster if it's on its side having more surface area. So less apparently is better, unless it's something like a goose or a lambic, something like that. Again, I don't know much about those, but I've heard those might be better off on their side. Alright, so that's the general basics on cellaring. If it's something you're interested in getting into, basically it's just a testament of willpower and a cool, dark place to be able to keep it and keep your hands off it until sort of a determined amount of time. I know for myself, I sort of say, I know that these ones I don't want to touch for 3 or 4 years. Just I've had it fresh, so I'm okay with that. A lot of these I'm just going on, X amount of years. I'm going to plan to put them there. Something like back in here, I got some Bigfoot stored, and I think I've said in the past that eventually I want to have a 20-year vertical of those. So that will be an ongoing process. And even though I know I did say before IPAs, I was sort of looking over here and I'm like, oh yeah, because I've got the Dogfish Head 120-minute IPA, which might be sort of one of those beers in a class by itself where, yes, it's categorized as an IPA, but it's just so far off the spectrum of what you would traditionally expect for an IPA that something of that kind of alcohol strength and flavor can very much benefit from having many years here in the cellar. I think we recently reviewed one, a fresh one, in 2008, and even the 2008 you could still see needed a good amount more time. So that's a 2011 bottle, and maybe we'll see it in 2021, I don't know, but it's not coming out here for a while. So that's pretty much the whole gist of cellaring, just to be able to just really see what comes out of a beer after a period of time, for a couple bucks to put something away and just see what's going to be different about it as time passes. Definitely can be interesting. Or you could just say, screw it, I'm going to drink the beer I'm buying right now, which is perfectly cool too. So, with that said, that's the cellar, and that's a little bit about cellaring.